Hi, I'm Tammy Greenberg, Senior Vice President for Business Development at RAB, and welcome to Radio on Main Street, the podcast all about radio. Our latest podcast series comes to you from the 2023 ANA Masters of Marketing Conference, where the marketing and advertising community all come together with a laser focus on growth. The conference showcased insights, strategies, and campaigns that leading brands have implemented to drive growth by meeting and exceeding their consumers' needs. RAB had the opportunity to chat with many attendees about their businesses, their marketing goals, the issues that they're most focused on, and of course, their thoughts about radio. In episode number 15 of Radio on Main Street at the ANA Masters of Marketing, Erica Farber, President and CEO of the RAB, chats with Ade Adeosun, Vice President of Marketing Solutions for TransUnion. The marketing division of TransUnion uses proprietary technology and methodology to help brands realize the effectiveness and impact of their marketing efforts. And it all starts with a deep understanding of the consumer, their habits, and what makes them tick.
Ade, thank you for stopping by Radio on Main Street.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about TransUnion.
Yeah, so TransUnion helps, most people know TransUnion for different aspects, right? You know, information for good is our mission. On the marketing side, TransUnion has really been helping brands and advertisers to really understand the effectiveness of their marketing, to really connect the dots. A big issue that we see today, obviously, is identity, right? We are here at a marketing event. You heard Mark Pritchard talk about recognizing what is important to, I'm paraphrasing here, but recognizing or understanding your consumer. And so identity is a foundation of that, right? So that is really one of the core aspects of what TransUnion is helping marketers solve for, right? The challenge in terms of understanding what exactly is happening with consumers. Who is the consumer, right? Many of us, we visit websites, we have multiple devices, we are individuals, we are personas, whether we are at work or in our family situation. And then we have all of the devices in our household as well, right? When you think about that complexity that exists today as it relates to what devices I interact with. And if you're going to delight a customer, you have to be able to connect those dots to see me as Ade and not see 7 different devices. And I think so that's the core of one of the core aspects of what we're helping marketers solve for. And then moving forward to, okay, now can I find those audiences in the ecosystem? Can I make my messaging relevant to them, right? We do not buy or sell media, but what we're helping marketers do is provide the information, the intelligence, so they can understand more about that consumer and they can interact with them in ways that consumer wants to be interacted with. And then on the back end, measure, has it been successful?
You make it sound so easy, but it is so complex.
You're right. You are absolutely spot on. It is complex, but it's also, especially with the things happening in our industry today, right? With cookies going away, which is the primary way where, not perfect. Everybody understood that. It's not
Right.
perfect, but it was the primary way that brands and advertisers use to really, track and understand who is behind an interaction.
Follow that consumer.
Exactly. And with all of the changes in the industry, right, with privacy and all the other aspects, right, those identifiers are going away. So that creates this big challenge for marketers to say, well, I still need to be relevant. I still need to make sure I'm having an interaction with the consumer. And so that's what we are very much, focused and being very successful in helping brands solve.
Consumer trust has become an even bigger issue. We keep hearing about that. And how do you overcome that? Because we're bombarded with so many messages. As you say, the cookies are going away. And yet when people are asking for more information, sometimes the consumer is a little hesitant to provide that data.
Yeah, I mean, I think of myself, right, as a consumer. I think that's where you should always start that, the lens of how you think about this. I don't like creep factor. I don't want people following me around and I browse something and all of a sudden something appears. So we are one of the things that we have always advise in our brands is, it starts with respect, right? It starts with consent. So those are aspects that you've got to really lean in on and never compromise it, right? It is better to have an interaction with a consumer to say, hey, I'm not sure quite who you are, than to go and acquire data that you don't know how it's been, how it's come by, right? And so that's one of the aspects. Again, when you talk about trust, that's one of the foundations of TransUnion in terms of, consumer trust is an imperative. And so trust, as we all know, is one of those things that can easily be lost. So brands
and hard to get back.
And very hard to get back. So what's important around that is that you're very open with the consumer, right? Making sure that they understand how the data is going to be used. But also you've got to think about what time should I really ask for that data? It's almost as, first time I appear on a site and somebody asks me my date of birth, I'm like, no, why? You haven't earned the right. So collecting information about consumers is important for marketers. What is also incredibly important is understanding when you ask for that information, because you've got to build that relationship, and which essentially is trust.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, the timing of when you make that ask.
That's right.
Never thought of it that way.
Yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your perspective on the audio space. Here we are at Radio on Main Street.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about the audio space today, and how do you think about the data and analytics as far as the listener?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Audio space has, as we've seen a lot of growth, right? We work with all the big players in audio, and we've seen a lot of growth, but it also makes sense. If you think about it, when a consumer, there are moments, we call it moments that matter, right? There are times where, for example, I'm in my car, right? My primary consumption and that interaction and that entertainment is audio.
Right.
That knowledge growth, a lot of people in the morning, I get up very early, I'm doing my exercises. Well, that's a great time to learn about something new. This is where podcasts and all these other aspects come into play. So we've seen this real explosion, I would say, in growth as it relates to audio. I think any marketer who doesn't recognize that is missing an opportunity. So there's a great place because of that interaction.
I'm going to stop you for a moment.
Yes.
Because the majority of advertisers have not embraced audio in such a positive way as you have just spoken about. And why do you think that is?
Well, I would say that in a way it's almost taken for granted, because this is a medium that's not new, right? And many times marketers, we fall to chasing the shiny object and looking for all these new different ways. And really, if you just think about it, if you step back and you think about yourself as a consumer, I've given the example that I've given. When I am putting my little ones to bed at night, they would often ask me, "Oh, Papa, can you play this music?" Right? I remember favoritely in the pandemic, every day at 6:00, my daughter would come in the office and say, "Papa, it is celebration time." And what her connection with celebration was music, us just being silly, dancing around. And that is an experience that you cannot.
And what a special experience.
It's a special experience. And so I would say that is such an opportunity when you think about audio, when you think about the connections we make. And I would say it is almost like photography. Mm-hmm. It makes an impression that lasts much longer than that initial component of that interaction. And that's why audio is a phenomenal medium.
I'm going to quote you on that.
Feel free to.
I love that. I love that.
Yes.
Obviously, data and analytics are critical. We've already heard about it in the presentations this morning. And yet, it's, you've spoken about this is what your focus is. And yet, for us in audio, it's not as easy to get our arms around that. So what thoughts do you have on how we can do a better job of making sure that we can get our arms around our entire listening audience?
Yeah, I would say it's the element of think about the consumer as a whole consumer
Mhm.
and recognize how you think about it almost like a customer journey, right? And that's the way I would say that's how we make audio um, integrated, right? Not necessarily thinking about it as a silo part.
Right.
And then when it comes to that data and the analytics component, it's exactly this. I don't think there's anything different. I would not treat audio any different than I would television in that sense, because again, consumers want the right experience.
Right.
I want recommendations, and it makes my life so much easier because I am time poor, and I want things to be curated for me. So I think the element of starting to think more about how do you curate the right type of content based on a person's interest, because as we all know, there is a ton of content. It's not a matter of sparsity of content. It's actually the opposite. And so if we think about how we curate the right components, and again, comes back to understanding that consumer, right? If you're addressing me and you're thinking about my experience just in the car without recognizing the interaction I have with my daughter, right? It's a missed opportunity, right? And so that is, in my mind, the elements of where data becomes incredibly important to help connect those dots so that you can create a better experience for the consumer.
Well, just in my life, 6 o'clock is going to have a whole new meaning to me now when I celebrate. And I love that. It's time for celebration.
Yes.
You come here obviously to not only network, but to hear what other marketers and brands are doing. Is there a particular concept or an idea that you're focused on that you think is going to be a game changer for the future?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things, right? Everybody talks about AI. And I almost want, as an industry, for us to step back and think about the use cases a little bit more. I talked earlier on about marketers chasing shiny objects. And, you know, innovation is critical. You also have to recognize, as a brand, right, you've got to, in my mind, I heard earlier on the CMO from Mars talking about being, just being, if you are a hard brand, if you're hard, be hard, right? So you have to think about, as I always say, the important component is you've got to be authentic, right? And so the thing that I would say that is really pressing in, and it's exactly what it was the same thing I heard from the Mars CMO, it's the same thing Mark Pritchard talked about as well, is us getting a bit more focused on the consumer and recognize that technology is an enabler, right? So the focus has to go back to the consumer. I would say that for me is really the element that everybody should really press in on is understanding, take every opportunity you can to understand the consumer and make them understand why you want to understand them, because the whole purpose is to delight them.
Right. So be completely transparent.
Yes.
I love that. We have a campaign where we talk about radio matters because and radio works because. So if you could finish the sentence, radio matters because.
It is every day of our life.
And radio works because.
It is so impactful. Like I mentioned earlier on, those interactions in that moment, they are indelible in our minds because we connect them. And that's just really how our brains work. So it goes beyond just that moment. It actually follows us and it goes, it actually has a longer lasting impact.
There are moments that matter throughout a consumer's daily journey, and we all know that audio plays a significant role in these moments each and every day. The interactions brands make within those moments become indelible. And as Ade says, audio impressions last much longer than that initial interaction, and that's why audio is a phenomenal medium.
If you'd like to learn more about radio and its many benefits, we invite you to visit us at rab.com, or you can email us directly at askrab@rab.com. Until next time, it's Radio on Main Street.